2024 promises to be a year of change in the Latin America Caribbean region, and it's quite possible a lot of that change will take place through the ballot box. For more on that, we speak with Stephen Sefton and Camila Escalante, both in Nicaragua this week. Stephen, Camila, let's discuss that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It looks to me like we're heading into a year that's going to be characterized by a mixture of quite serious crisis in many of the countries in the region, but also quite promising opportunities for other countries. And for example, here in Nicaragua has just signed, it's just entered into action a free trade agreement with China, and they negotiated it in record time. And now it's active, and that means that around 71% of the exports of Nicaragua that it sends to other countries are going to be able to enter China with zero tariffs, which is a huge deal for a big food producing country like Nicaragua. With a relatively small population of around 7 million people, that now has the opportunity of sending on zero tariff basis much of its food production to a country with 1.3 billion people in China. Mm-hmm. So the year ahead for Nicaragua looks very promising, because they finished the year well ahead of other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, with something their central bank reckons they're going to finish the year with 5% growth, which is much higher than the countries in the rest of South America. Bearing in mind, of course, that Central America always does a little better than the rest of the region in these macroeconomic GDP figures. But anyway, and that's Nicaragua. And if you look at Venezuela, for example, it looks as though Venezuela is going to be able to take the opportunity of the developing multipolar world, the developing institutions of BRICS Plus, for example. It may even become a member of BRICS Plus itself over the next 12 to 18 months. It's overcome the worst effects of the US government and European Union country attempts to stifle the economy and force political change by making life as difficult as possible for Venezuela's population. They've defeated that attempt, and it looks as though Nicolas Maduro, if he does decide to stand for re-election, and that hasn't been decided yet, will stand a very good chance of getting re-elected in the elections that I think are scheduled for towards the end of this year. I think it's in November. So of course, the crisis continues in Cuba as a result of the relentless blockade, the genocidal blockade that country has suffered for over 60 years now. But that's as a direct result of United States policy, and if Cuba were not subject to those sanctions, it would stand a very good chance of developing along the similar lines to those that Nicaragua will be able to take advantage of now, because Cuba has this privileged relationship with the People's Republic of China and also the Russian Federation, whereas other countries in the region that are subject to neoliberal dominated policies, especially economic policies, of course, but also in general kind of quite repressive policies, like Argentina. And Argentina's facing this current, they are already in a crisis. And that crisis is going to get much worse over the next 12 months as a result of the insane economic policies and the very, very repressive turn that Javier Milei's government has taken, following the attempt to introduce to force through what they call this urgent and necessary decree, DNU in the Spanish acronym, which is now being challenged in the courts, even in Argentina's courts, which are dominated by the centre-right. But what Milei and the Argentinian elite that he represents are trying to do is to take Argentina literally back to the days of the 1970s dictatorship. and maybe we can talk about that more in another program. But then you also have Chile, which is in a kind of political crisis. It's not so much an economic crisis. Where the government there has been incapable of doing things that it was voted in to do. For example, to reform the pension system, to reform the education system, to try and resolve the long-running dispute with the Mapuche people in the south of the country, and also, very importantly, to reform the extremely repressive and, I'd argue, fascist Carabinieri that are unreconstructed from the years of Pinochet. And then you have in Ecuador, you have a deep economic crisis, a deep social crisis, serious problems with the economy. And in Peru, you have this continuing government, this de facto usurper government under de facto usurper President Dina Boluarte, and there's no sign of that deep constitutional crisis in Peru being resolved anytime soon. In Colombia, things could turn out quite well for President Petro, and there, although the social crisis continues, the economy isn't doing badly, Petro stands a good chance of being able to carry through the health reforms that were approved in the legislature recently. And also it looks as though he'll be able to carry through his plans for a program of what he calls total peace against the opposition of the country's entrenched right wing. So and also we have to bear in mind that through 2024 that there are many elections there. This year, for example, early in the year, there are elections in El Salvador, Panama, Dominican Republic. That's unlikely to change the overall geopolitical balance in the region, but there could be a serious change in Mexico when Andrés Manuel López Obrador ends his term and there are elections in Mexico. It's not clear whether López Obrador's candidate will come through and win and be able to continue implementing what they call the fourth transformation of the country. And then later in the year, Uruguay and Venezuela have elections. As I said earlier, it's very possible. I'd consider it likely that President Maduro, if he stands for re-election, will win those elections. And then towards, I think it's in June, Brazil has very important municipal elections, which are likely to be regarded as some kind of referendum on the presidency of Lula da Silva. But all of this is happening in the shadow of increasing attempts by the United States and increasingly desperate attempts by the United States to maintain its power and control in the region.
Yeah, and so, one of the things that we've been seeing in terms of what the United States is positioning itself to do right now is that we're hearing all of these statements, as you guys probably know, that I have followed for a very long time, which is SOUTHCOM, the U.S. Southern Command, and its commander, General Laura Richardson, which have been, increasingly, public, visible. They're talking about, the commander, has been talking about our continent's natural resources, about national economies, about elections, about the media in Latin America, about internal matters and things that have nothing to do with the United States or the foreign policy of those countries. It's very obviously, blatantly overreaching. And so we're seeing more and more of U.S. attempts to reposition itself in our region because perhaps of their failures in other places and their need for the resources in our region, because that's, a large part of why they're trying to maintain influence over Latin America and the Caribbean, and why they are so invested and interested in the elections in our region. And they're doing so with these old colonial powers. All right, this is going to have to be a topic for another discussion, but not only the United States, but they've been partnering with Canada, France, the Netherlands, and the UK to heighten their military presence around Latin America through what they call the Western Hemisphere Allied Command, which is really just NATO in Latin America. So it's a really interesting thing that's taking place. We know that every year there are these military drills, these supposedly regional joint military exercises that take place, namely in Guyana, in Colombia in recent years, and there's going to be many other that are going to be carried out in different countries of the Caribbean this year. But not only are we seeing those 5 countries, Canada, the United States, France, Netherlands, and United Kingdom, but we've seen the participation of Germany, South Korea, and Spain as well. So these are completely foreign militaries that are attending these exercises, and those 5 countries of the Western Hemisphere Allied Command are also holding meetings both at the Southcom headquarters in Doral and also in Ottawa about Latin America and the Caribbean. These are countries that are completely foreign, mostly in Western Europe, which apparently are having to create a new sort of military command in order to further interfere in our continent, which is really alarming and frightening and something that it seems like no one is talking about.
Thank you both, Stephen and Camilla, and we'll speak with you again next week.
Thanks a million, Don.
Thank you, John.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.